This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Care Notes from Cherished Companions, and it is led by Doug Wilber, who is the president, CEO, and you do a little bit of everything there, don't you, Doug?
I do. Yeah, I clean the bathrooms. I do all sorts of things. So.
Hey, that's the modern CEO of today. I love it.
So how are you doing this week?
You know, COVID really got to me last week, and I actually shared it on Facebook and on some of our other podcasts. But I'm now back on the road to recovery. But I wonder how you all deal with it on a daily basis. It can't be easy.
You know what? It's not easy in the sense that we are, always having to learn and always having to be vigilant. So one of the things that we're constantly doing is trying to make sure that our protocols are right and that, that we're erring on the side of caution so as not to expose people unnecessarily to, the COVID virus. Unfortunately, knock on wood, we actually have come through fairly unscathed, and that speaks very highly that the measures we've taken has been, have been the right ones, I believe. Our nurse has been very involved in making sure our protocols are tight, and then just we feel blessed as well that somehow we've avoided it. Now, did you actually get the virus?
No, luckily I did not get the virus. But what happened was last Wednesday, in the middle of a podcast, my email opened up on me, and I looked at it, which I shouldn't have done. But I found that a very close family friend had just passed from COVID. And, I've known other people who have gotten the illness, but until it really hits that close to home, you don't know how you're going to feel. And
Right.
I got very scared, and instead of sharing those thoughts with other people, it manifested into being very angry and upset. I just felt like I couldn't do anything right for about 24 hours. And then I just had to calm myself down and say, this is what we're all going through. And like you said, tighten up just a little bit more and, be more careful. And, understand that it is a reality. It's, it's not a fake disease going on right now.
No, one of the things, too, is it's important, I believe, to get perspective, too. And the things, having to do with perspective is we live in a world where there is infectious disease. And whether it be, the flu that happens in the winter is much more dangerous than what people realize. And more people die and will die by a large shot, at least the way it's looking, from tuberculosis every year than from COVID. So there are a lot of bugs that are out there,
right,
and that we've kind of learned to live with. But I think sometimes the fear, it can be paralyzing when something's new. And, that's one of the things is, it's actually the fear of the unknown and kind of what almost feels arbitrary.
Absolutely.
Because, we want to control things and we want to control our lives, and it's really hard when there's something we feel like we don't have a lot of control over. And that's kind of a scary thought and a really difficult thought to process. And what you were talking about, I think, is a really common thing, which is that you had to this is how I interpret it, at least. You had to process all those emotions and those feelings.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
because most of us, and I'm sure you have found this too, that you're going about your daily routine. You're doing all the things that you know you should be doing in your business. And so you tend to sort of forget, what is really happening because you're dealing with other things all day long. And then all of a sudden when you hear that how real this is, how close to home it hits, you feel like your life has been shattered itself. And it took me 24 hours, but I'm back up and I make sure I wear my mask and wash my hands and, stay as safe as I can.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I will mention one other thing just before we start the show. I know we're, kind of going off topic a little bit, but I think it's important. And that is one of the things that I think people don't understand is in all of human history, the last 100 years, and probably, the last 100 years, but maybe the last 80 years especially, we have been extremely blessed because in the past, when people would get a common cold, the chances of dying from that was really high. Relatively speaking,
sure.
That could turn into pneumonia and other things. But with the advent of antibiotics, we've lived in a very different reality than most of human history. And I do think that, part of this is we can turn around and say how fortunate we are that in our lifetime, that really we have not had that ongoing fear that so many other generations have had in dealing with something as simple as a respiratory infection. And there's a blessing part of this, which is to appreciate how blessed we've been, through my lifetime, that this is the first time, that we've really had something like this, and Lord willing, we won't experience another, but there is a part of this that is can be put into context that I think is important.
Absolutely.
So,
well, you have a guest for us today, I understand.
I do, and she's been wonderfully patient. My guest today is Chris Voinovich, and Chris is a client care manager here at our company, and she has been at Cherished Companions now for a year, and she just had her anniversary a couple days ago.
Well, congratulations!
She's stepped into her role with great aplomb, and has done a wonderful job. And the role of client care manager is one that's kind of unique to our company. I believe there aren't. We have ourselves structured a little bit differently. And first of all, welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
And Chris, why don't you tell me a little bit about you?
Well, I've been a caregiver myself for many years. I started out in the hospitals and then moved on to some private caregiving, and then I ended up here. I have 3 children, 3 grown children. My oldest daughter is studying to be a nurse, so she's kind of following along in the footsteps. She's worked for the company as well as my youngest daughter, too. That's a little bit about me.
Yeah, it's been kind of a family affair.
Yeah, which is common here, though.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's actually a great compliment, I think, that, we have. If you recommend it to your family, either you really like us or you really don't like the family. So I'm going to go with the former, not the latter.
Definitely, yeah, definitely.
So, Chris is involved as a client care manager. And what the client care manager does is wears a number of hats. But essentially, her role is that of making sure that the clients have a good experience as far as having, the right caregiver in and having the right, schedule. And as things change, she really owns that with a group of clients that have been assigned to her. And so it takes a lot of talent actually to be a client care manager, because one, you have a patient focus or a client focus, and then the second thing is you have to have a caregiver focus, because you have to know the pool of caregivers so that it makes up a right match, and then you have to have a health focus.
Definitely.
And to do that as well. So that role is one of the most vital and important roles, because it really is the link between the caregiver, the client, and the company in every respect. Now, you're one of how many client care managers?
There are 6 of us.
Yeah.
There are 6.
So we're a large enough organization that there are quite a few people who are doing this role, and each one owns a group of clients that they're caring for. Now, about how many clients do you have?
I think I am up to almost 30.
Okay.
About 30.
Yeah. So, and those 30 clients, I'm sure, obviously, not to disclose any information, but tell me some of the challenges that you have day to day.
Well, you have some clients who I speak with on a daily basis, and then there are some that you don't hear from too often at all. You have some of the clients are very particular, and they have only a certain group of caregivers that they want to use. There are clients who require more care than others. Some you have to pair up a lot personalities, especially if it's a companionship case. Then you have to look for a caregiver that's going to match up with the client. I view it a lot like, in a sense, of a concierge service. I feel like, matching it's like a matchmaking business almost, in a sense, to, pair up so that the caregivers are comfortable and happy too. I mean, it's really on both sides.
Right.
So it's a lot of fun. It can be very challenging. I think you described it, Doug, really well, and I didn't get it until I really started to get it. It can be a lot of like a puzzle, putting a lot of pieces, and I had to do that today. Mm-hmm. Sometimes when you have a client that prefers or only wants one caregiver and they're booked with someone else, well, then you have to rearrange a little bit of everything to get it to fit. But
did you get it to fit?
I did.
Good.
I did. About 8 phone calls later, it all worked out. It's a lot of give and take, I think, with clients. I find with my clients, if you establish that good relationship and they know that you're working hard to, give them the caregivers that they want, and they see that you're listening, they're willing to sometimes bend with you. Like, that's what I had to do today. I had to sort of shorten a shift with one to make another, and it works. If you have that good relationship, sometimes you get lucky. Because
you were working to their end, the thing that they desired in this situation. And so it was kind of give and take in the situation so they could get
who they wanted, and everybody was happy. So when it works out like that, it's nice.
And it looks easy. It looks easy on TV.
But it's a lot. It can be a lot, but I love it because it is challenging.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, especially when you see the open shifts are clear, for me, that's such a good feeling. Mm-hmm. So I really kind of challenge myself to get it done.
So when you jump in and you are assigned a case,
right?
So the way it happens is the director of client care will usually say, hey, I want you to take this case, because in her case, she's trying to match the right care manager with the client as well. So the care director ends up coming to you and saying, I want you to take this on.
Right.
And then she describes the individual and the needs and other things, or I will at times. And so what is your first thought after you have a case like that presented to you?
So what I try to do with the caregivers specifically, I try as best I can to talk with them on a regular basis to sort of get to know their personalities, so that when I get a new client and I get the information on them and an insight onto, what their life is like and their personality is like, I try to think of who would be a good match for that client, and then just sort of go from there. I'll think of, I have, 3 ladies or men or whoever it is that I think just by hearing about this client who would be a good match, and that's how I sort of started, of who I think personality-wise and skill-wise, of course, too.
Okay, and that's what I was going to ask. So you look at personality, you look at skill sets. So tell me how skill sets could be different needs for different clients,
Well, some clients, like I said, companionship. Maybe somebody just needs someone to talk to maybe cook some meals, do light housekeeping.
Maybe drive them somewhere.
Right, drive them to an appointment, whatever. Yeah. So then I have to think about maybe who's more personable, and there are some caregivers who strictly want to be caregivers and want to do more hands-on with a client. So, maybe there's somebody who would rather, do turns, and clients who require lifting and transfer assist. And then we have some caregivers who are a little bit older and maybe don't want to do the lifting and the personal care. So those caregivers are maybe better matches for someone who just needs someone to talk to, or, some cooking, types of things like that. So it sort of depends. Each case is really unique. I mean, each case really is unique. So luckily, we have a big pool of caregivers. So there's a lot to choose from. Right. There really is.
Well, what I say is, you've seen one case and you've seen one case. Right. That every situation is unique.
Oh, yeah.
And so a good client care manager is one who can take into account all those situations, or not situations, I'm sorry, really need to take into account personality,
lifestyle,
take into account,
everything.
Right, exactly, needs, the temperament of the caregivers.
And then you throw in pets and things like that.
Right,
too.
exactly.
Yeah, so then there's that to deal with. Smokers, clients that are smokers, and caregivers who don't want to be in a smoking home, and caregivers that are afraid of animals. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of different pieces to it, a lot.
Now, Karen, you had care for your mom, and I know you've talked often about that. And your experience was definitely a mixed experience.
Right.
And so, do you have any questions or context of things that went on that you might ask Chris about?
Sure. So, when it came to my mom, our biggest thing was we wanted to make sure that the caregiver could connect to her more than connecting to me or my brother, who were in and out of the house all the time. And oftentimes we found that some of these care providers did not listen to what my mother's needs were. So can you give me an idea how, as a, adult child, we can really explain the needs? And sometimes it's difficult for us, my mother had a stroke. We knew medically what she needed, but we tried to explain what her personality was like. And some of the caregivers just did not want to cooperate.
Yeah, that can be really hard. I think that comes down to, for me, in my case, having a good idea of what caregiver, who I'm sending in and what their personality is. I do know some caregivers who are sort of cut and dry. They go in, do the job, get it done, and they are great employees and great caregivers, but they may not be the one that has that soft touch or that personality that's going to be as chatty as maybe as someone else. So I think it just has to do with spending the time and just getting the right caregiver there to know their personality. You know, hey, I want someone to come in and sit by my mom's bed and really spend time engaging with her.
Right.
So I would say, one thought around this is, and tell me if both of you don't kind of agree with this, that part of it is drawing out the information from the client's family if the client is not able to speak for themselves.
Right.
To really say, hey, tell me about your mom and how, what does she like? Does she want someone who's chatty, or does she want, or is that going to drive her absolutely bonkers?
Well,
go ahead.
One of the things that I learned, but I didn't know it in the beginning, and I actually learned it after my mother passed away, that it's not unusual that the first caregiver who comes to your house is not the perfect fit. And like you said, they may be excellent in many ways, but just not for your situation. And we were expecting that whoever was sent, they were going to be the perfect person. And when they weren't, we found it was so much more work for ourselves. If I had to go through it again, I think I would understand that it does take time to connect you with the right person. It's not always going to be the first try.
Yeah, surprisingly, though, I think maybe because of our process and other things, what I describe it as with our clients as I'm meeting with them, I tell them it's a little bit like a blind date. And I said, you're not going to know until you actually go on the blind date whether this is the right fit or not, and I said, you may be scratching your head thinking, what were they thinking, by setting me up with this blind date, and I think that there's, that aspect. But I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, that probably 90 to 95% of our caregivers, the first match is probably the right match.
I think if you put the time into it and you know your caregivers, I think that's a good number. I would agree with that.
Yeah, so the experience you had, Karen, I don't know that that's necessarily what we have, although we do have that blind date effect. But part of it is we spend a lot of time in that initial meeting. Oftentimes when I'm meeting with families, I'll come back and I'll say to the staff, it should be someone like this.
Right.
It may not be that person, but what I try to do is explain the personality of an individual that would be a good fit in that situation. And then we try to describe that this is their need, or that they want someone who's quiet, or other things, right?
Right, exactly, 100%.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes you stand out, because recently I had a connection with somebody who was looking for caregiving, and they don't live in this area, and they were sort of experiencing the same thing that we did. And I said, try to be a little bit more specific what you're looking for, and know that it may not be the first match. And then I said, but if you want to move your mother here to Ohio, I know of some great people who could take very good care of her.
Well, thank you. You mean us.
but I'm starting to realize that not all companies like yourself are run like really, truly like a family. And Cherished Companions is. And I hear that when you have people on like Chris who, her two daughters are working for the company. If she didn't like the company, she wouldn't be referring her daughters, okay? And she wouldn't be working so hard for the clients. And you do that when you're family and you care about each other.
Well, yeah, and the other thing is that I believe that we have deeply ingrained in us a culture that we actually care. One of the things I tell people is that I want to be, when I started the company, I wanted to have a company where care was done by people who care. And I think that that's really important, because whether it be a caregiver or a care manager or someone in HR or, someone, who answers the phones here, you have to have that sense of care. And one of our kind of mottos or taglines, I guess you would say, is home care with heart. And, I believe very strongly that the heart piece is the most important thing, because I've said it over and over and over the years that you can teach technique, but you can't teach someone to have a heart.
Right.
And that's true organizationally, top to bottom, that one thing we don't lack are people with passion, I think, as a company. But it's been a year now for you. And so what have been the challenges? You talked about the puzzle part of it. But what would you say if you look back over this last year, what has been the biggest challenge you've had?
Well, I think as of recent, the most challenging part has been with COVID, having a shortage of caregivers and a spike in clients
demand.
Wanting care. Yeah,
right,
definitely. Yeah. That's been challenging, although I think we've done a pretty good job in tackling that. I think the biggest challenges would probably be people, when we get clients, sometimes they want it to work right away. They don't want to, they want the caregiver in, and they just expect it to click right away. And like we were talking about, sometimes it takes time just to get to know somebody and feel comfortable with your caregiver in the home on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. I think another big challenge would be if we have a client that wants, just for an example, 7 days a week, and they want the same caregiver. That can be challenging to try to explain that, you need a backup. You need to have maybe more than one caregiver. I think those are some of the most challenging things for me, is just trying to explain to a client or convince them that one is ideal, maybe, but sometimes to be realistic, you need to have, let's have you meet more than one caregiver, so that if something happens with that caregiver, there's another one that can come in.
You mean if someone gets sick or something like that? Yeah, somebody gets
sick. I just think it's always good to have backup, and not everybody is, they just want their one person, and sometimes you can't always have that one.
Right.
That one may be scheduled somewhere else. That's the challenging part, is maybe we need to start cloning some of our caregivers.
Well, Chris,
Multiplicity. Did you ever see that movie?
Yeah. I really do believe that the client has to understand that they are not going to be available 7 days a week for their spouse or parent or whomever needs the care. And you can't expect a caregiver to be there 24/7, 7 days a week. And I agree, having somebody as a backup, or, just having other people that you can trust to be there with your loved one is important. And that was something that we asked for right from the beginning. We weren't looking for that one perfect person, but we were looking for caregivers who were going to be there so that we could have some reprieve in between. And eventually it worked out, but in the beginning, we had to learn the ropes like everybody else.
So, Chris, one other thing that, what have you really liked about the role? Because it was a new role.
Yeah,
you haven't done
right.
this specific, but whether it be the role or the company or whatever, what was it that you say, yeah, I found my place, or
right.
that you have?
Well, I'm on the other side of it now.
Yeah.
That I was a caregiver. So now I'm on the other side of it. So I like working with caregivers in a different way, with the scheduling and that type of thing, talking to them about the clients. And then I like that I'm not a caregiver, but now I have so many clients. It's not just one family that I work for. I like the satisfaction of getting all of my clients filled. I get a lot of satisfaction when I can make the clients happy with the caregiver that, hey, I have this person in mind. I think they'd be good. And when they go and then it's a fit, that makes me so happy that I was right, that it was a good match. And then when I can have that consistency and I can give the clients and the caregivers a steady schedule, that I love that. I love when I can say, I have a client, 5, 6, 7 days, and I've got a group of only, 2 caregivers going in there. I like to see that consistency with a couple of regulars and some backups. Mm-hmm. That for me.
And that right match and all that.
Yes, I love it. Yeah, that's the best part.
So this is why, Karen, to talk to you a little bit, why I think the general experience for our clients is different than the experience that you had, was because, that actually is a thing that our client care managers like Chris find satisfaction in having that, matching that right person.
Right.
It's kind of like she's a yenta, she's she's the matchmaker.
Right. It feels so good when I know that, I worked on it and that the clients are happy, and then I talk to the caregivers and they love their clients. That makes me so happy when I know, because then I can rest easy knowing that my client's happy, I've got a good caregiver in there, everybody's happy. Let's move on to the next one.
Right.
Sometimes it takes a little bit of time, but when I get it, that makes me happy, because I really strive to keep as minimal amount of caregivers going in as I can.
Right. Yeah, and that's always our goal, is how to do it. What's been probably the most challenging thing is during the whole issue around COVID is, our hearts go out because the demand has been so high, and we're getting calls. We want to bring our mom home or our dad home, and so we have a limited pool of caregivers, not because we're not trying. It's just right now there's a shortage, and there's a lot of reasons for it, some of the reasons good and some of the reasons bad, but none of them are our fault, and to be able to try to use the limited resources and group that we have, and be able to get care for all the people that need it. And, it's been a yeoman's task, to do that. And our care managers have done an amazing job in accomplishing what sometimes feels like the near impossible,
for sure.
With the needs and other things. I will put a pitch out of, I know this broadcast goes out to all sorts of different people, but, if someone wants to be a caregiver, please consider it. If you've ever, thought, I'd like to help someone out, because I'll tell you, the need is greater than it has ever been. And it's not just us experiencing it. this is the national trend. We're actually getting calls from other companies asking too if we can take on some of theirs because they don't have the capacity, and they know, that we've done a better job than they have in being able to get people on board and other things. We have a great HR staff that's been able to recruit, well, and with good people, and we've been able to fill things because of a great, care management staff, and I'm been willing to, take a hit when it comes to things like overtime as well, and so we've been able to do it, but we really need good people. So if anyone out there and this kind of tugs on their heart, please give us a call at the company.
It's very rewarding. I think that maybe people have an idea of what caregiver, but it's such a wide range of things that we do, really.
Yeah.
And it is very a rewarding feeling.
Yeah, we actually have one caregiver who is in her 80s, and she's, well, if you saw her, you'd think she was in her 60s. She's very young, but she's still able to do caregiving because of the cases that she is able to go on, because she is just I think fortunate and very genetically blessed to be older in a body that is still younger, and she is a phenomenal caregiver, and so we have opportunities for lots of different folks who do this. Anyway, I want to kind of wrap things up unless you have any questions, Karen.
Well, you mentioned something towards the beginning, and I think anybody who wants to be a caregiver needs to remember this, that you may not have all the technical skills to be a caregiver, but having that heart and that compassion to want to learn and to be helpful and to assist, I think goes a longer way. And that's what I found with the best caregivers that we had for my mom. They had a compassion, and you can't create that. It has to come from within.
Yeah, no, that's why I say care has to be done by people who care. It is that simple that, you have to have that conscientious nature, that desire to help people, that heart for others, and that focus on others. And that, if that brings you joy, we have a lot of people that started out and they took care of kids throughout the years and they loved it. And, those are people are probably going to be a natural caregiver for an older person. They have that nature that wants to help, to nurture, to do the right thing for others, and we can give the training. We can that is the least of the issues. But if someone really wants to do the care, we'll make it happen so that that they can get the skill sets that they need to do it well. Anyway, I want to thank Chris for taking the time to be with us today, and I'm glad, Karen, that you're kind of over that bump, and I know because I've seen it over and over the experience you mentioned over the last 4 or 5 months, where I've seen people go through that very same thing. So even that is not unusual. Yeah. So anyway,
thank you.
Sure.
Well,
take care.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today, and we'll do this again next month. Again, this is Care Notes, and the lead of Care Notes is Doug Wilber from Cherished Companions. Have a great day, everybody.
Take care.